The night was cruel and alive. The storm didn't just fall from the sky, it tore through it, ripping clouds apart and crashing down like punishment from the gods. The marketplace below was chaos and thunder and fear. Flames from scattered torches flickered against wet marble, stretching long, trembling shadows over the faces of those too afraid to move. People huddled under broken arches, clutching their cloaks, whispering prayers, pretending not to see the blood trail weaving through the puddles between their feet. And in the middle of it all, she ran. Severina. Her name carried through the storm, shouted by guards who once bowed before her mistress. Their voices chased her through the narrow streets, bouncing off the walls of stone buildings that had seen centuries of pain. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Every muscle in her body screamed, every breath was fire. Her bare feet slapped against the slick marble, slipping, catching, then moving again. She clutched her side where the wound reopened, the same wound carved into her by the Luna she once served. The rain hit her face like needles, washing the blood away only to make her colder, weaker, smaller. The mark on her shoulder burned with every heartbeat, the same mark the Luna had pressed into her skin years ago, whispering that it would remind her of her place. But tonight, that mark wasn't a chain. It was a map. A promise. A curse refusing to fade. Lightning cracked above the forum. For one brief moment, the sky turned white and everything stood still. The statues of wolves carved in ancient stone looked alive, their eyes glowing with reflections of fire and fury. And beneath their watchful gaze, Severina stumbled through the square where, years ago, she had been sold. The memory hit her hard, iron chains biting into her wrists, a crowd cheering as if she were an animal to be displayed. She remembered the Luna's cold smile, the Alpha King's shadow watching from the balcony, silent, powerful, unreachable. That was the night she stopped being human. Now she hid beneath one of those same arches, her body pressed against the wet stone, shivering not from cold but from the unbearable weight of memory. Her breath came in short bursts. The world felt small, the storm louder than her heartbeat. She glanced at her hands, half-shifted, trembling, claws threatening to tear through skin. Her wolf wanted out. It wanted to fight, to tear apart every face that ever called her servant. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when the scent of her pursuers still filled the air. She swallowed hard and whispered to the dark, to herself, to anyone who might be listening. Not again. I won't be their slave again. Her voice broke somewhere between defiance and despair. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong to a person, it belonged to the past, to pain, to a soul too tired to keep screaming but too stubborn to stay silent. The storm held back. Then, something else joined it. It wasn't thunder this time. It was deeper. Older. A sound that moved through the air like a warning, low, commanding, and filled with something not quite human. The kind of sound that made the wind pause, made the torches flicker, made the world hold its breath. A hell. Her heart stopped. She knew that sound. Everyone in the Alpha Kingdom knew that sound. It was said to be the call of the king himself, the one whose blood could command armies and silence storms. A voice that ruled through fear and fire, yet tonight, it sounded different. Not anger. Not rage. Something else. Searching. The rain slowed. The chains that hung from the marketplace stalls swayed gently, clinking together like distant bells. The guards' voices faded behind her. The air thickened, heavy with power, the kind of energy that made every hair on her skin rise. She pushed herself deeper into the shadows, pressing her palm against her wound, feeling her heartbeat pulse beneath her fingertips. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement through the veil of rain. A silhouette at the far end of the square, tall, broad, cloaked in darkness that seemed to move with him. His steps were deliberate, slow, each one echoing through the hollow streets. Even the storm seemed to bend away from him, the rain avoiding his path as though the heavens themselves dared not touch him. The Alpha King. He didn't need a crown. Power clung to him like a second skin. Severina's chest tightened. She remembered that figure, standing on the balcony the day she was marked, his eyes unreadable as she was dragged away. The world had told her he was untouchable, a ruler chosen by blood and war, a man whose mercy was rarer than the moon's tears. She had hated him. She had dreamed of killing him. So why now did her body tremble with something that wasn't just fear? She tried to crawl backward, but her strength failed. The pain in her side burned like fire spreading through her veins. Her vision blurred, and she slumped against the wall. The cold marble felt almost kind compared to everything else. Through the curtain of rain, he moved closer. She could see him now, his dark hair plastered to his face, eyes glowing faintly gold in the dim light, like a wolf half-shifted but holding the form by sheer will. His cloak was torn, the edges dragging through mud, but his posture was still regal, steady. The marketplace fell silent as if it recognized its true master. When he stopped a few steps from her hiding place, Severina held her breath. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he could hear it. He turned his head slightly, and for the briefest moment, she felt his gaze cut through the dark and meet hers. She froze. He shouldn't have been able to see her there, tucked behind the broken arch, hidden by shadow. But somehow, he did. His voice came low, carried by the rain, deep enough to reach her bones. Severina. The sound of her name from his lips was not a command. It was something else. Something dangerous. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to curse him, to tell him to leave her in the dirt she came from, but the words refused to come. He took another step forward. The puddles rippled under his boots. "I said your name once before," he murmured, eyes never leaving hers. "The night the Luna marked you. You didn't hear it then." She flinched as though struck. The image burned behind her eyes, her body on the ground, the Luna's hand pressing iron against her flesh, the king watching in silence from above. "You were there," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was," he said quietly. "And I've thought about that night every day since." Her pulse thundered. "Why? So you can finish what you started?" He tilted his head slightly, the shadow of a frown crossing his face. "No. Because I was wrong." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Even the storm paused. He moved closer. She could see now the exhaustion etched into his face, the scar that cut across his jaw, the way his hand trembled slightly when he reached out, as if afraid she'd vanish if he touched her. But she did vanish, in a way. The girl she used to be, the servant, the victim, the silent shadow, died a long time ago. All that was left was someone who had learned to survive by becoming invisible. She pulled back, pressing her shoulder against the wall, shaking her head. "Don't come closer." The words came out rough, broken, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. He stopped. The distance between them felt thin enough to cut. Rain ran down his face, dripping from his chin, tracing the edges of his mouth. His eyes softened, just slightly. "You've been running a long time." She wanted to laugh. "Running is all I know." "And bleeding," he said quietly, his gaze falling to her wound. "You're still bleeding." She pressed her palm tighter against it. "It'll heal." "It shouldn't have to." Something inside her cracked at the way he said it. He took one careful step closer, his presence heavy, magnetic, dangerous. The storm picked up again, lightning flashing across the marble square, and in that light, Severina saw something she hadn't seen before, not the monster the world whispered about, not the ruler who broke men with a glance. But a man drowning quietly in his own silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The rain filled the space between their breaths. She wanted to ask him why he came. Why now, after all these years? Why chase her through the ruins of a kingdom that had already taken everything from her? But deep down, she already knew. There was something about that night, that storm, that silence, they weren't just coincidence. Something bigger had begun to stir. Something ancient, written in the blood of wolves and kings. And the moment he found her, the world itself seemed to notice. The torches flickered one by one, dimming until only the light of the lightning remained. The statues around the square cast long, trembling shadows, their stone eyes gleaming like they were alive again. The howl that had called him before rose once more in the distance, echoing through the ruins like a warning. But this time, he didn't look away. He looked at her. Straight into her. And she felt it, the pull, the recognition, the bond that should never have existed between a servant and a king. Between a girl branded in chains and the ruler who once held the key. Her chest rose and fell, her breath shallow. He took another step. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless, wild, afraid, and yet drawn to him like fire to its twin. She whispered, "Why are you here?" His answer came like thunder breaking through the rain. "Because I saw what she did to you. And I can't unsee it." The words hit her harder than any blow ever could. She blinked through the rain, unsure whether it was tears or storm water on her face. He stepped closer until he was just an arm's length away. His voice dropped to something almost human. "You were never meant to serve her." Severina shook her head, her voice shaking. "And what was I meant to do? Burn for her instead?" His jaw tightened. "No. You were meant to rise." For a heartbeat, everything inside her went still. She wanted to scream that it was too late, that the rising had already passed her by, that she was nothing but ashes and scars and memories that hurt to touch. But when she looked at him, she saw something fierce and raw reflected in his eyes, belief. And it terrified her more than any whip, any command, any storm. Because belief meant hope. And hope was dangerous. He lifted his hand, slowly, carefully, stopping just short of touching her cheek. "Let me help you." Her voice cracked. "You can't. Try me." The lightning flashed again, illuminating the space between them, and for the briefest second, she thought she saw it, the faint shimmer of silver flame beneath her skin, the power she had spent years burying. The storm seemed to bow to it, the air pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The Alpha King froze, his eyes widening just slightly, as though seeing something the world had tried to keep hidden. "You don't even know what you are, do you?" he whispered. She swallowed hard, her voice low. "I know what they made me." His gaze darkened. "Then maybe it's time you remember what you were before that." The storm crashed again, the sky splitting open. And somewhere in the distance, the first sound of wolves howling in unison filled the night, answering to her, not him. Her eyes glowed silver. The rain turned to mist. And for the first time in her life, Severina didn't run. If her pain pulls you in, if her fight feels like your own, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Here, every scar tells a story worth surviving. Rain pooled around their feet, the sound of it whispering through the broken columns like voices of ghosts. The storm that had howled moments ago was now a low growl in the distance, thunder echoing softly as though unwilling to disturb what was unfolding beneath the archway. The air between them pulsed, alive, charged, trembling with something neither could name nor deny. He stood just a few steps away, broad shoulders glistening with rain, the black and silver of his armor catching what little light remained from the torches scattered across the square. His presence filled the space completely, heavy yet magnetic, the kind of power that demanded attention without needing to ask for it. But beneath that power was something unexpected, restraint, quiet, control, as if every muscle in his body was fighting the instinct to reach for her. She felt it. That silent war within him. Her back pressed against the cold marble wall, every breath sharp and shallow. Her body ached, torn between the instinct to fight and the impossible pull drawing her closer to him. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless, uncertain, hungry for safety but terrified to trust. He took another step forward. The sound of his boots against the soaked ground was low, deliberate. His gaze never left hers. There was recognition in his eyes, not the kind that came from memory, but from something deeper, something ancient. He said her name again. Softer this time. Severina. It fell from his lips like a confession. Her breath caught. No one had spoken her name like that, not with reverence, not with understanding. It had always been shouted, commanded, punished. But from him, it felt like a prayer whispered into the storm. She wanted to ask how he knew her. Why his voice felt like a chord she'd forgotten but somehow still remembered. But her throat burned, her pride sharper than her fear. "Stay where you are," she said, though the words shook. "I don't need your mercy." He didn't move closer, but his eyes did, tracing every bruise, every tremble. "I'm not here to show mercy," he said, his tone low, controlled. "I'm here to make right what was broken." The words struck something deep inside her. The idea of something being made right was too dangerous to believe in. "You don't even know me," she said. His jaw tightened. "I do." The conviction in his voice made her heart falter. She searched his face, trying to read him, the hard lines, the shadow of pain etched beneath his eyes, the way his breath hitched when he looked at her scar. There was no lie there. Just truth too raw to be comfortable. The rain dripped from his hair, sliding down the curve of his neck, disappearing into the collar of his armor. His scent cut through the storm, wild pine, steel, and something darker, something old. It filled the air around her, seeped into her lungs until she couldn't tell if she was breathing him in or drowning in him. She pressed a trembling hand to her wound, the blood still warm against her palm. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "And yet," he said, taking another step, "here I am." She wanted to hate him for it. Wanted to curse the gods, the fates, anyone who would bring an alpha into her path when all she wanted was freedom. But his eyes held her still, those stormlight eyes that flickered with a kind of sorrow she hadn't expected from a man like him. When he finally moved closer, she didn't retreat. Not because she trusted him, but because she was too tired to run. He reached out slowly, as if she were something fragile, a wild creature that could vanish if startled. His hand hovered near her chin, hesitant. "Let me see," he murmured. She flinched at the sound of his voice so close. But something in it disarmed her, that quiet ache, that need to understand. Against her better judgment, she let him lift her chin. His thumb brushed against her jaw, tracing the edge of the scar that crawled up her neck. His fingers trembled slightly, and she could feel his breath against her skin. Steady but strained. When his eyes darkened, it wasn't lust that consumed them. It was fury. A deep, simmering wrath that made the air between them vibrate. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice rough. She didn't answer. The truth would destroy everything. It would rip open the wound she'd spent years trying to stitch shut. He already knew, though. She could see it in his eyes, the moment his fury sharpened, the moment realization hit like lightning. The Luna. His Luna. The mark she left wasn't just a scar on Severina's body. It was a brand of betrayal carved into the alpha's soul. His hands dropped, fists clenching. The ground beneath them seemed to hum with his rage. Severina stepped back, sensing the shift in him. His wolf stirred, she could feel it, that ancient beast beneath his skin, restless, furious, dangerous. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she said quietly. "How should I look at you? Like I'm not the enemy." His chest rose and fell, breath heavy. "You were never the enemy." The words hung there, fragile and fierce. For the first time, she saw the man behind the title, not the Alpha King, not the warrior feared across kingdoms. Just a man haunted by his own choices, by the ruin his Luna had left behind. He exhaled slowly, the sound waited. "You shouldn't have been there that night," he said, almost to himself. "If I'd known," his voice broke, barely audible. "If I'd known, I would have burned the world for you." Her throat tightened. The rain around them softened into a mist, and the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was thick with all the things neither of them dared to say. "I don't need your pity," she said, her tone sharper now, though her voice trembled beneath it. "It's not pity." He stepped closer, his presence surrounding her again. "It's recognition." She swallowed hard. "Of what?" "Of the bond." The air stopped moving. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Her heart stumbled in her chest. "You're wrong," she whispered. "Whatever this is, it's not real." He tilted his head slightly, eyes searching hers. Then why does your pulse match mine? Her breath hitched. The sound of her heartbeat filled her ears, fast, uneven, and beneath it, she could hear his, deep and steady, syncing with hers like a drumbeat echoing through the storm. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. She shoved him away, panic cutting through the haze. No, she said, shaking her head. You don't get to claim me. Not after what your Luna did. He didn't fight her. He just stood there, watching her unravel. His silence was a strange kind of mercy, letting her rage, letting her break. Finally, when her breath came in ragged gasps, he spoke. I'm not asking to claim you, he said quietly. I'm asking to protect you. She looked up at him, eyes wet, from the rain or from tears, she didn't know anymore. Why? Because I owe you a life, he said. And I intend to pay it back. The lightning flared again, casting his face in silver light. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between guilt and devotion. For the first time, she didn't know which scared her more, the danger she'd been running from, or the safety he was offering. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of blood. Hers. His. Theirs. The storm wasn't done yet, not outside, and certainly not within either of them. And as the night closed around them, the truth settled heavy in her chest. The Alpha King wasn't her enemy. He was her reckoning. The fire flickered inside his chamber, low and restless, the way a heartbeat trembles when it remembers pain. Rain still whispered against the stone walls, though softer now, like the world itself was catching its breath after the chaos outside. Severina sat near the hearth, wrapped in the Alpha King's cloak, its weight heavy across her shoulders, the scent of him everywhere. She should have felt safe. But safety was something she no longer trusted. Safety was always the first lie before the fall. Her body shivered, not from the cold, but from the storm of memory pressing against her chest. Every time her eyes drifted shut, she saw the marble columns, the torches, the crowd that had gathered to watch her humiliation. The chains. The man who'd held the brand to her skin while the Luna smiled. He stood across from her now, silent. Watching. The firelight caught in his eyes, gold and storm gray, the kind of eyes that saw everything, even the things she tried to hide. She could feel his gaze, not as a threat, but as a weight she wasn't sure she could bear. He wanted to ask. She could sense it. The questions burned in him as clearly as the fire behind him. Who had she been before the chains, before the blood, before the scar that bore the Luna's mark? But he didn't ask. He waited. That patience unsettled her more than any demand ever could. She pulled the cloak tighter around her. Her fingers brushed against the thick fur at the collar, and a strange ache unfurled inside her. His scent clung to it, wood smoke, steel, rain, grounding her in a way that felt both wrong and necessary. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the rain. Then, her voice broke the silence, soft, almost like she was afraid the walls would remember. It wasn't always like this, she said. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just listened. I was born to a noble pack, she continued, eyes distant, voice trembling. The House of Varen. My father was beta to the northern court. My mother, the healer of our lands. We lived near the cliffs where the moon touched the sea. I used to think nothing could touch us there. Her words faltered, then gathered strength. But bloodlines mean nothing when power changes hands. The Luna's armies came under the Alpha's crest, your crest, and my pack bowed, thinking it would save them. He flinched, almost imperceptibly. She saw it, but she kept going. When they took me, they said it was punishment. Said I had sinned against the order of the moon. But what they called sin was only instinct, a shift I couldn't control. My first transformation. The fire cracked, scattering sparks that lit her eyes in shades of silver. I didn't shift like the others. It wasn't fur and bone and hell. It was flame, silver fire. It burned through my skin, my veins, my soul. The elders said I was cursed. The Luna said I was dangerous. She said my bloodline carried a flaw the gods wanted erased. Her hands clenched around the cloak. So they erased it. Or tried to. His jaw tightened, and his voice, when it came, was low. She had no right. No one ever told her that, Severina said quietly. She looked at the fire, and for a moment, her eyes reflected it, fierce, haunted, unbroken. They dragged me through the marketplace, bound in chains forged with wolfsbane. The people cheered. I remember the torches, their flames looked like the ones that came from my body that night. The Luna stood above me, in her golden armor, and called me an abomination. She told the crowd I was being sold to cleanse the kingdom of my curse. The Alpha's fists curled at his sides. He didn't interrupt. They bit on me like I was nothing, Severina continued, her voice cracking. And when the bidding stopped, I was sent to her estate. To serve. To bow. To forget who I was. She swallowed hard. I learned quickly that pain can become routine. The way she would strike without warning. The way she smiled when she did it. She wanted me broken, but she didn't understand, there's a kind of breaking that only makes you sharper. Her breath trembled. The first time she burned me with her mark, I didn't scream. I thought if I stayed silent, I could keep a piece of myself untouched. Every lash, every scar, every cruel word, I swallowed it all. I waited. For something. For anything. The Alpha stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like a man approaching the edge of a memory he didn't want to see. And no one helped you? Her laugh was hollow. Help? She shook her head. Even the guards feared her. Some looked away. Others enjoyed it. I used to pray one of them would end it, just one clean strike to make it stop. But no one ever did. I stopped praying after that. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. The fire burned lower, but its light clung to her face, to the lines of defiance that hadn't faded with time. He moved closer. Not enough to touch, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. You survived, he said. She looked up at him, eyes steady. Surviving isn't living. He didn't argue. Because he knew she was right. Her gaze softened for a moment. I used to think if I could just get out, if I could see the moon without bars between us, maybe I'd remember what freedom felt like. But when I escaped, I realized something worse, I didn't know who I was anymore. Her voice lowered, barely a whisper. When you've been owned long enough, you start to believe it. You start to think the cage is safer than the open air. He took another step, his shadow falling across hers. You're not in a cage now. She met his eyes. Aren't I? The words hit harder than he expected. He exhaled, slow and unsteady. You're free here. I'm in the Alpha King's den, she said. That's not freedom. That's just a different kind of danger. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. She turned toward the fire again, her face softening as her mind slipped back to the past. I used to have a brother, she said quietly. You would have liked him. He believed in honor, in the code of the old bloodlines. When they came for me, he tried to stop them. The Luna had him executed at dawn. I watched from the window as they made an example of him. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. That's when I stopped being afraid of pain. There's nothing left to fear when the worst thing has already been taken from you. He felt something sharp twist inside him. Guilt. Not because he had swung the blade, but because it had been done in his name. In his kingdom. I should have known, he said. There was no reason for you to, she replied. I was nothing. A servant. A ghost in her halls. He shook his head. You were everything she feared. That's why she hurt you. The words hung between them, true and heavy. For a long time, they just stood there, two broken pieces of the same war, bound by a past neither had chosen. The firelight flickered against his face, revealing the cracks in his calm. Beneath his control was grief, old, festering, familiar. He wanted to reach for her. To take her hand. To promise her that she'd never suffer again. But promises like that were fragile things, and she deserved truth, not comfort. Instead, he asked softly, "Why didn't you run sooner?" Her eyes met his, tired but steady. "Because I wanted her to see me one last time. I wanted her to know I wasn't broken." A small silence followed, the kind that said more than words ever could. He nodded slowly, respect flickering in his gaze. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." She looked away. "Strength doesn't keep you warm at night." "No," he said quietly, "but it keeps you alive long enough to find warmth again." For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, and in that shared look, something shifted. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a crack in the armor. A quiet recognition that both of them carried ghosts that refused to die. She could feel her pulse steadying. The fire's warmth seeped into her bones, and though part of her still wanted to run, another part, a deeper, quieter part, wanted to stay. But she couldn't let him see that. Not yet. She stood, the cloak sliding from her shoulders, pulling at her feet like a shadow. "I don't need your pity," she said again, though her tone had softened. He looked at her, calm but resolute. "And I told you, it isn't pity." "Then what is it?" He stepped closer until the air between them felt alive. "It's recognition," he said. "You survived what should have killed you. You carry a fire the Luna couldn't extinguish. You think that makes you broken, but it makes you divine." She froze, the words cutting through her defiance. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with reverence. Not with awe. The silence after that was deep. The kind that hums with unspoken things. Outside, the storm began to fade, replaced by the slow, distant howl of a lone wolf echoing across the valley. The sound sent a tremor through her chest, a reminder of what she was, and what she'd lost. The Alpha King turned toward the sound, his expression unreadable. "They're calling for me," he said quietly. She wrapped her arms around herself. "Then go." He didn't move. "Not until I know you'll stay." "I don't belong here." "You belong where you're safe." She shook her head. "Safety doesn't exist for people like me." He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his gaze shifted. A vow formed silently behind his eyes. "Then I'll create it," he said. Her breath caught. She wanted to tell him that wasn't possible, that he was promising something the world had already proven false. But for the first time in years, the part of her that had forgotten how to hope flickered back to life. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was dangerous. But as the night stretched on and the fire burned low, Severina realized something she hadn't dared to admit before. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to feel alive again. The wind howled through the cliffs, carrying with it the scent of rain, stone, and something ancient, something that remembered. The night had stretched long by the time they reached the ruins. What was once the heart of an empire now lay broken, swallowed by time. Columns leaned like weary sentinels, their marble surfaces carved with wolves locked in eternal battle. Moss clung to the carvings, but the shapes beneath were still fierce, alive, almost breathing under the moonlight. Severina stopped at the entrance. Her bare feet sank into the cold mud, but she barely noticed. Her gaze was drawn to the murals lining the walls, stories etched in stone, too old for most to believe, yet heavy with truth. The Alpha King walked behind her, his steps slow, measured, reverent. The air shifted around them, thicker, charged, as if the land itself recognized something returning home. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence between them hummed with the weight of what neither dared to name. Severina brushed her fingers across one of the carvings, a woman crowned in silver flame, surrounded by wolves bowing before her light. The stone was cold, yet it pulsed faintly beneath her touch, as though answering her. She froze. The mark on her wrist, the scar the Luna had burned into her, began to thrum softly, faint light seeping through the skin. Her breath hitched. It wasn't just a scar. It never had been. The Alpha King saw it too. His eyes darkened, flickering between awe and dread. "Your mark," he whispered, stepping closer. "It's nothing," she said quickly, pulling her hand back, but the glow only grew brighter. The elder who had led them there, a thin, gray-haired wolf with eyes like fading embers, sank to his knees. His voice trembled as he spoke. "The child of the flame," he breathed. "The prophecy, it's her." Severina stepped back, shaking her head. "No. That's not me." The elder didn't look away. "It is written, when the silver fire returns to flesh, the false crowns will burn, and the world will be made whole again. You bear the mark." "I bear a curse," she said sharply. "That's all." But the Alpha King's gaze never left her. He saw the truth forming, the puzzle pieces aligning in a way that made his blood run cold. He remembered the stories told by his mother before she was taken, stories of a girl born under a dying moon, cursed with fire that could unmake empires. They said she would come as a servant, rise as a storm, and bring balance by fire and fong. No one had believed it. Until now. Severina turned away from them, heart pounding. "You don't understand," she said, voice breaking. "I didn't ask for this. I just want to be free." The Alpha took a slow step toward her. "Freedom isn't something the gods give freely, Severina. Sometimes, it's something they demand a price for." Her hands trembled. "Then I don't want it." The elder bowed low, forehead touching the ground. "The servant who will destroy the crown," he whispered. It was never meant as warning. It was a promise. The wind picked up, curling around them like breath. The torches flickered. The carvings on the wall seemed to shift under the dancing shadows, the silver flame in the woman's hand stretching wider, burning brighter. Severina felt the pull deep inside her chest, the same pulse she'd fought for years, the one that rose whenever fear did. It felt alive now, whispering through her veins, begging to be known. "No," she whispered to herself, clutching her wrist. "No, not again." The Alpha King's eyes followed the glow creeping up her arm, tracing the faint silver veins that now shimmered under her skin. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath the surface, recognizing her not as threat or prey, but as something older, something sacred. He stepped closer, voice low. "You feel it, don't you?" She turned on him, eyes burning with unshed tears. "I feel cursed. Every time I think I can breathe, this," she lifted her arm, trembling, "reminds me I'm not free. You want to call it prophecy, destiny. I call it chains." He didn't flinch. "Maybe the difference between chains and destiny is what you do with them." Her breath caught. The words landed somewhere deep, where the broken parts of her heart still dared to hope. But she shook her head. "You don't know what it's like to carry power you can't control. To wake every night afraid you'll burn the world around you." His expression darkened. "Don't I?" She blinked, startled. He looked past her, to the carvings. His voice dropped lower, rougher. "You think power doesn't come with fear? My wolf was born of storms. Every full moon, I fight him for control. Every breath I take, I have to remind him that this kingdom isn't his to tear apart. You think I don't understand the weight of something that can destroy everything you touch?" The confession hit her like a gust of wind. For the first time, she saw it, not just the Alpha, the king, the legend, but the man. The one who bore the crown like a burden, not a gift. Their eyes met again. For a heartbeat, the ruins fell away. It was just them, two creatures forged by suffering, bound by something older than either of them could name. Then the ground beneath them trembled. The elder gasped, falling back. "The temple responds," he murmured. The air shimmered with heat, though no fire burned. The carvings glowed faintly, each wolf's eye alight with silver. The mural of the woman crowned in flame blazed brighter than the rest, her gaze fixed on Severina. She stumbled backward. "What's happening?" The Alpha King reached for her, but before his hand could touch, a surge of light burst from the mural, striking the mark on her wrist. Pain flared through her arm, sharp, searing, pure. she screamed, clutching her hand. The glow spread across her body, her veins turning silver beneath the skin. Severina, he shouted, grabbing her shoulders, steadying her as she collapsed against him. The world blurred. Voices faded. She could only hear one sound, the echo of her own heartbeat, magnified, ancient. In her mind, a whisper rose, soft, feminine, powerful. Child of the flame. The world waits for your fire. She gasped, pulling back as the light began to fade. Her body trembled violently. It spoke to me, she whispered. The stone, it spoke. The elder's voice shook. Then the time has come. But Severina was shaking her head, tears streaking her face. No, I won't be your prophecy. I won't be your weapon. The Alpha King's grip tightened gently around her arms. You're not a weapon, he said quietly. You're the balance. She looked up at him, disbelief flickering in her eyes. Balance? That's just another way of saying sacrifice. Not if I can help it. He meant it. She could hear it in his voice. But the promise made her chest ache. She had learned long ago that promises from powerful men were the most dangerous of all. The elder rose slowly. You can deny it all you wish, girl, but the moon does not wait for your acceptance. The flame has chosen you. And when the false Luna falls, the fire will finish what was begun. Severina turned away, shaking. The air around her shimmered faintly, the last threads of silver light clinging to her skin before vanishing. She took a deep breath, staring out toward the horizon where the ruins opened to the dark valley below. All my life, I've been told who I am, she whispered. A servant. A curse. A mistake. And now you tell me I'm a prophecy. Her voice cracked. When do I get to just be, me? The Alpha stood behind her, silent, his expression unreadable. You think destiny is cruel, he said finally, and maybe it is. But maybe it's also a way of giving you back what was stolen. Maybe this is the God's way of saying you were never meant to bow. She turned her face slightly, meeting his gaze over her shoulder. And if destiny demands blood? He stepped closer, the space between them pulsing with tension. Then I'll bleed before you do. The silence after that was thick, trembling. Her breath hitched. His words were too close, too dangerous. She wanted to tell him to stop. To stop looking at her like that, like she was something sacred, not shattered. But she couldn't. Because some small, terrified part of her wanted to believe him. The elder cleared his throat, his voice barely a whisper. The flame does not sleep, my king. It wakes now, in her blood, in your reign. When the moon bleeds silver, the world will shift. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. Then we'll be ready. But as he looked at Severina, he knew readiness was a lie. Nothing could prepare them for what this prophecy would demand. The ruins fell silent again. The glow faded. The night returned to stillness, as if pretending nothing had happened. Severina pulled her hand from his grasp and stepped back, her voice quiet but firm. I won't let anyone use me again. Not the Luna. Not the prophecy. Not you. He nodded slowly, accepting the blow. Then don't let them. Stand beside me instead. The words hung between them, dangerous, intimate. The wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers through the ruin, soft, unexpected. It wrapped around her like a reminder of something she'd almost forgotten, that even after fire, something beautiful could still grow. She didn't answer. She couldn't. But when she looked back at him, her eyes no longer held only fear. There was something else there now, defiance, perhaps. Or the first flicker of belief. And as the moonlight broke through the clouds, striking the carvings once more, her mark pulsed faintly, not in pain, but in recognition. The child of the flame had awakened. And though she didn't yet know it, the world would never be the same. The moment her blood hit the marble, everything stilled. Time itself seemed to flinch. The noise of battle, the clash of claws, the thunder of paws against stone, faded into a sharp ringing silence. The Alpha King caught her before she fell completely, his hands trembling as if holding something too precious to lose. The scent of her blood cut through the air. Ancient, powerful, and wrong in a way that stirred every primal instinct within him. She tried to speak, her lips parting to whisper his name, but only a weak breath came out. Her pulse fluttered beneath his touch, fading and wild. Around them, wolves tore at each other, snarling, blinded by loyalty and rage, but he heard nothing beyond the sound of her struggling to breathe. He lowered her to the ground gently, brushing a strand of soaked hair from her face. "Stay with me," he said, voice breaking. "Don't you dare close your eyes." Her gaze met his, storm-meeting flame. There was fear there, but also defiance. Even now, bleeding out on the very marble where she had once been sold, she refused to look small. "You weren't supposed to care," she murmured. "Kings don't bleed for slaves." Something inside him cracked. His wolf howled within, pushing against the thin thread of control that still held. He could smell her pain, taste her fear, and beneath it all, something familiar, something that made the prophecy's words echo in his mind like a curse he had tried to forget. All around them, chaos raged. The Luna's laughter rose above it, cold and bright, echoing against the stone walls. "See," she spat. "This is what she does. She brings ruin wherever she goes. You think she's your destiny, but she's your destruction." The king lifted his head slowly, his silver eyes burning with restrained fury. "You scarred her," he said again, quieter now, but sharper, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. The Luna smiled. "And you commanded it. Do not pretend your hands are clean." The crowd gasped, voices rising in ripples of disbelief and horror. The court, once unified beneath his rule, fractured before his eyes. Some stared at the Luna in shock, others turned their gaze toward the king, unsure whom to fear more. But the king didn't move. He couldn't, not while Severina's blood stained his hands. His mind twisted back to that night, the night the Luna begged him to rid their kingdom of the silver curse. He had been a younger ruler then, one trying to prove himself to a court that worshipped power more than truth. And she had whispered poison in his ear until he believed it. Until he signed the decree that made Severina a servant, not knowing who she really was. Now, that decision was bleeding out in his arms. He rose slowly, carrying her as though she weighed nothing, his cloak dragging through the blood pooling around their feet. The guards nearest him froze, uncertain. His voice was low when he spoke, but it carried across the entire arena. "Enough." The sound of that one word, the authority behind it, shook the ground. Wolves halted mid-shift, their growls dying on their tongues. Swords stilled in mid-swing. Even the Luna faltered, her smirk trembling for the briefest second. He looked down at Severina, whose eyes fluttered weakly open. Her voice was a whisper barely audible over the wind that now howled through the open arches. "You shouldn't have done that." "Done what?" he asked. "Chose me." Her lips curved faintly. "It'll cost you everything." He leaned closer, his voice rough. "Then everything is a small price." The Luna screamed, and her power erupted, dark light, sickly and cold, surging toward him like a blade of shadow. He turned his body, shielding Severina completely. The impact tore across his back, sending him to one knee. The pain was instant, but his grip on her never loosened. His wolf roared again, louder this time, no longer bound by the control he'd always carried like armor. When he looked up, his eyes were no longer just human. They glowed, a deep, molten silver, mirroring the mark that now burned faintly across Severina's skin. The court gasped again, this time not in fear, but in awe. The prophecy, the one whispered by elders and dismissed by scholars, was no longer a myth. The child of the flame had awakened, and the Alpha King had become her protector. The Luna took a step back. "You can't," she stammered, the first crack of fear in her voice. "She's meant to destroy kings." He met her gaze coldly. "Then perhaps the crown deserves to burn." Lightning struck the center of the arena, splitting the marble where Severina's blood had fallen. The storm above them thickened, responding to something ancient and wild now pulsing through the air. Severina stirred in his arms, her hand trembling as she reached toward the ground where the lightning had struck. The mark on her palm glowed brighter, threads of light crawling up her wrist. Every scar she'd ever carried began to shimmer, not in pain, but in release. The chains the Luna had placed upon her, invisible but binding, started to dissolve in a faint shimmer of light and smoke. The Alpha King's heart pounded as he watched her power unfurl, raw and uncontained. It wasn't the fire of destruction, it was the fire of rebirth. The kind that remade what was broken. The Luna lunged forward, desperate, her voice shrill. "She will end us all." Severina's voice came, quiet but steady. "No. I will end the cruelty you built." The air exploded. Silver flame burst from her body, sweeping through the arena like a wave. The wolves nearest her fell to their knees, not in pain, but in reverence. For the first time, they felt the pulse of something older than power, truth. When the light dimmed, the Luna was gone. Not dead, not destroyed, just vanished, swallowed by the echo of her own magic. Only ashes remained where her crown had fallen. Severina collapsed, the strength leaving her. The Alpha King caught her again, lowering her carefully to the marble that was now cracked and steaming. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath unsteady. "It's over," he said. But she shook her head faintly. "No, not yet." Her eyes, still glowing faintly silver, lifted to the sky. "The flame doesn't end, it passes on. There's more to come." He wanted to tell her to rest, to stay, to stop carrying the weight of destiny, but he knew it was useless. She wasn't just a woman anymore. She was the promise every slave, every broken wolf, had whispered in the dark. The end of false kings and hollow thrones. Still, when she smiled faintly, it wasn't the smile of a goddess. It was a girl's smile, tired, trembling, human. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing me." His chest tightened. "I always did. I just didn't understand what I was seeing." Her eyelids fluttered once more, and she slipped into unconsciousness. He looked down at her, at the silver light that still pulsed softly beneath her skin, and he knew, this wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of a war. The court slowly began to rise, some in awe, others in terror. The smell of smoke and rain filled the air. Above them, the storm began to clear, the clouds parting just enough for the moon to break through, huge and full, painting everything in silver light. The Alpha King stood, lifting Severina in his arms once again. His voice, though quiet, carried across the broken arena. "From this night forward, no wolf will kneel as property. The age of chains ends here." No one dared speak. No one dared move. Even the elders who had once doubted the prophecy bowed their heads. As he walked away from the ruins of the arena, the echo of her earlier words followed him like a ghost. "Kings don't bleed for slaves." He smiled faintly, bitterly, the words now etched into his soul. "Then perhaps I was never meant to be just a king." The night swallowed them again, leaving behind only whispers and ash, the story of the branded servant who bled silver fire and the Alpha who chose her above his crown. The world had witnessed the first crack in an empire built on cruelty. And somewhere deep within the wind, an ancient voice murmured what every living soul now feared and hoped in equal measure. The prophecy had begun. The cave breathed like something alive. Every sound, every drop of water, every shift of the wind, carried weight, echoing through the hollow chamber like the pulse of an ancient heart. The faint light from the moon seeped in through a crack above, painting the stones in silver and shadow. It was a sacred place, one where the spirits of old Alphas were said to linger, their whispers carried by the wind, watching, judging, remembering. Severina lay upon a bed of soft moss near the edge of an underground pool. Her body trembled from fever and pain, her skin pale against the dark earth. The mark on her arm, the one that had burned when her power awoke, still glowed faintly beneath the surface of her skin, as though her blood remembered the fire even when she wished it would forget. The Alpha King knelt beside her, his armor discarded, his hands stained with the remnants of her blood. He'd washed the wound again and again, even though it had already begun to heal, as if he could cleanse himself by touching the evidence of what he'd once allowed. His fingers hovered over her skin, uncertain, trembling. The soft glow of her mark reflected in his eyes, and he swallowed hard, the confession lodged in his throat pressing like a blade. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked in a way no king's voice should. "That night, when she ordered your punishment. I didn't know." His breath caught. "I didn't know she would do that to you. I thought you were gone. I thought they'd taken you to the borderlands." Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, she only stared at him, her gaze distant, as if looking through him into some memory she'd buried too deep to touch. Then, softly, almost brokenly, she asked, "You were there?" He nodded once, his jaw tightening. "I ordered the punishment." The words hung between them like a storm held in place by silence. The cave seemed to close in, the air too heavy to breathe. Her breath came shallow, her chest rising and falling with visible effort. The flicker of pain in her eyes wasn't from her wound, it was from something far deeper, the kind of hurt that claws into the soul and refuses to leave. He lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. "I believed her. The Luna told me you'd betrayed the crown. That you'd tried to curse the wolves of the palace. I thought I was protecting my people." His voice broke again, softer now, filled with something that sounded like shame. "But I was protecting her." Her lips parted, trembling as she forced herself to speak through the rawness in her throat. "You thought punishment would erase betrayal?" He looked up then, his eyes haunted. "I thought punishment would restore order. I didn't see the truth until it was too late." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the spirits in the cave seemed to withdraw, giving them space to unravel what was left between them. The light flickered as the moon shifted above, shadows crawling across the stone like ghosts of the past. Severina turned her head away, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. "You can't undo what was done." Her voice trembled. "You can't take back the nights I bled for your order. Or the years I spent in her shadow, praying to forget the sound of your voice." He reached for her, then stopped, his hand hovering just above her wrist. "I know," he said softly. "But I can bear the weight of it. If you let me." She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and sliding down her cheek. "Why now?" "Because I see you," he said. "Not as what they told me you were. Not as a servant, or a symbol, or a prophecy. Just you. The woman who stood in the storm and still didn't break." Her chest rose sharply, a quiet sob threatening to escape. "Don't do that," she whispered. "Do what?" "Make me feel." Her voice cracked. "It's easier to hate you." He gave a faint, broken laugh, his eyes wet. "Then hate me. But don't leave me behind that wall." She turned to face him again. The glow of the moon painted his face in soft silver, revealing the exhaustion that lived beneath his eyes. His hair was damp, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his expression one of a man torn apart by his own history. Her fingers twitched, instinctively curling toward him. "You were a god once," she said quietly. "Untouchable. Perfect. I used to believe even your shadow was made of light. And now I see you bleeding like I did." He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have had to bleed for me." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at him, really looked, at the trembling in his hands, the tremor in his breath, the silent pleading in his eyes. It was the first time she'd seen him stripped of power. The first time she'd seen the man, not the alpha. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally. "I don't deserve it." "Then why ask me to trust you?" He exhaled slowly, the sound rough, uneven. "Because if you don't, I'll lose the only thing worth saving in this world." Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. The air between them tightened, charged, intimate. The scent of the cave, wet stone, moss, the faint trace of his skin, wrapped around her like something she couldn't escape. He reached again, this time slower, and when his hand brushed hers, she didn't pull away. The touch was gentle, tentative, but it carried the weight of years of silence and regret. "Then let me make it right," he whispered. "Trust me, or leave." Her breath caught. The words hit her like a blow, simple, raw, heavy with meaning. Trust me, or leave. She wanted to hate him for saying it. Wanted to remind him of the chains, the scars, the years stolen from her. But her heart beat traitorously fast, her pulse sinking with the rhythm of his. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless, uncertain. She turned her hand slowly, her palm pressing against his. The warmth that passed between them wasn't human. It was something ancient, the bond that had been denied, broken, and now tentatively reignited. Their foreheads met, softly at first, like the cautious meeting of two worlds afraid to destroy each other. His breath mingled with hers, warm and uneven. Her fingers brushed his cheek, tracing the roughness of his jaw, the faint scar near his temple. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper that trembled with every word. "If I trust you, it means I let you close enough to hurt me again." His eyes closed, his forehead still resting against hers. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving I won't." The world outside the cave had gone still. Even the wind seemed to pause, listening. Somewhere deep within the stone, the spirits murmured, the sound low and mournful, like a warning or a prayer. She felt the warmth of his hand spread up her arm, steadying her, grounding her. The fire inside her, once wild and consuming, softened into something gentler, something that felt almost like peace. For the first time since the storm, she didn't feel like she was running. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the scar that marred her skin. The touch burned, not from pain, but from recognition. It was as if he was sealing something ancient between them, something neither could name but both could feel. She closed her eyes, letting the moment settle deep into her bones. The silence stretched, not empty but full, of promises, of ghosts, of what could still be rebuilt. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "Don't make promises you can't keep." He smiled faintly, weary but sincere. "Then I'll keep the ones I can. Starting with this." He brushed her hair from her face, his thumb lingering just beneath her eye. "You're not alone anymore." Her body trembled, but she didn't pull back. She leaned into his touch, just enough for him to feel the acceptance buried beneath her hesitation. Outside, the storm began to fade completely, replaced by the distant song of night creatures waking. The moonlight deepened, casting the cave in a soft, dreamlike glow. Two wolves, one broken by chains, the other by guilt, sat beneath its light, bound by something neither fully understood yet. When she drifted to sleep at last, her hand still rested in his. And for the first time in his long reign, the Alpha King didn't think of the crown waiting beyond the cave. He thought only of the woman beside him, and the fragile trust he now carried like sacred fire in his hands. The past wasn't gone. The scars weren't healed. But the distance between them had begun to break. And though dawn was still far from reach, the darkness around them felt, for the first time, a little less cold. The night of the union began with silver banners strung between marble pillars, the scent of rain still clinging to the air from an afternoon storm. The great hall of the Alpha Kingdom shimmered beneath torchlight and gold. It was meant to be a celebration, a moment to heal the divisions of the empire. Wolves from every province filled the chamber, their voices rising in cautious harmony. For the first time in years, peace seemed close enough to touch. Severina stood at the king's side, still bearing the faint traces of her wounds, her presence both fragile and defiant. She wore a gown of muted ivory, the fabric soft against her skin, though her heart beat unevenly beneath it. Every breath she took reminded her she was out of place here, a ghost in a palace that once fed on her pain. The Alpha King had told her that this night would change everything. He had promised her safety. He had promised that the court would finally see who she truly was, not a servant, not a weapon, but someone worth standing beside. And for a fleeting moment, under the glow of the torches and the low hum of ancient hymns, she almost believed him. But across the hall, the Luna watched. Her beauty was sharp, carved from cruelty and control. Her eyes followed every movement Severina made, every glance the king cast her way. There was no softness left in her. Only venom disguised in grace. When the time came for the Luna to speak, the hall quieted. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade wrapped in silk. "Before we bind this night in unity," she began, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, "I would offer truth. For truth, not silence, is what binds an empire." Severina's fingers tightened against her skirt. The tone in the Luna's voice carried weight, a warning she could feel in her bones. The king's posture shifted beside her, shoulders tensing. "Luna," he said carefully, "this is neither the time nor the place." But she smiled, serene, unbothered. "Oh, it is exactly the place." From the shadows, two guards stepped forward, dragging something wrapped in old cloth, a chest, ancient and sealed with the crest of the first Alpha dynasty. The Luna gestured toward it with elegant finality. "This was found in the ruins of the southern temple," she said. "The records of the bloodlines. Proof of what you have been hiding, my king." A low murmur swept through the hall. Severina's heart began to race. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes turned toward her, suspicion burning like heat against her skin. The Luna continued, her voice smooth but growing sharper with every word. "The woman beside our king, the servant who claims redemption, is no victim of fate. She is the daughter of the rogue pack that burned this capital to the ground 20 years ago. The heir of the wolves who slaughtered our kin." The hall erupted. The sound was deafening, gasps, growls, shouts. Wolves half-shifted in anger, chairs scraped against the marble. Severina's breath caught, her chest tightening. Her vision blurred for a moment, unable to process what she'd just heard. The king turned to the Luna, his voice cold. "You lie." She tilted her head, her smile cruel. "Do I?" She nodded to the guards, and they tore open the chest. Scrolls spilled out, old, faded, but marked with seals. She picked one up and unfurled it for all to see. The lineage of the silver flame. The bloodline of fire. The one prophesied to rise again and destroy the throne. Her gaze flicked to Severina. "You hid her under your wing, my king. You sheltered the very flame that will burn your crown." Severina stepped back, her pulse a pounding drum. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not." The Luna's voice grew louder, feeding the crowd's unrest. "Tell them who you are, child. Tell them your mother's name." Severina's throat closed. She wanted to speak, to explain, but her voice wouldn't come. The memories that had haunted her, the flashes of fire, the screams, the night her family vanished, rushed back with merciless clarity. She remembered her mother's face in the firelight, the mark of the silver flame glowing on her hand. The crowd pressed closer, anger rippling through the air. Someone shouted, "She's the cursed one." Another echoed, "The prophecy. It's her." The king's council rose from their seats, their robes sweeping the floor like dark tides. The eldest among them, his voice heavy with authority, spoke to the king. "My lord, the law is clear. The child of the silver flame cannot live within the crown's walls. Her power is destruction. Her existence is betrayal." The king's jaw tightened, his breath shallow. He looked at Severina, his eyes flickering between disbelief and despair. "Say something," she whispered. He didn't. "Tell them it's not true." Her voice trembled. "Tell them I'm not the enemy." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The hall's tension closed in, pressing against his chest. He saw his council, his soldiers, his people, waiting for him to choose. The Luna's smile widened. "You said you'd protect them," she murmured. "Then protect them from her." Severina felt the shift in him. The hesitation. The doubt. The fracture of something she thought was unbreakable. "You said you'd stand by me," she whispered again, her voice barely audible through the chaos. His gaze dropped. "I must protect my people." The words struck her harder than any blade could. Her body went still, her mind blank. Around her, the hall blurred, the faces, the torches, the movement, all swallowed by the sound of her heartbeat. She felt the guards before she saw them, rough hands grabbing her arms, cold chains clinking as they reached for her wrists. Something inside her snapped. The old scar on her neck pulsed hot, the air around her vibrating with unseen force. "Don't touch her," the king said sharply, but it was too late. The first spark ignited at her fingertips, a small flicker of light, quick as breath. Then another. The torches on the walls flickered, the air grew heavy with the scent of smoke. Her veins burned with liquid fire, her eyes glowing with the same silver hue that haunted the murals of the prophecy. The Luna took a step back, alarm flashing in her expression. "What have you done?" Severina's voice rose, not a scream, but a tremor that carried through the air like thunder. "You wanted the truth? Then see it." The flames burst from her hands, silver and alive. They didn't burn the way normal fire did, they shimmered like molten light, spreading across the marble, consuming the shadows. The court scattered in terror. Wolves shifted, claws scraping against the stone as they fled. The king moved toward her, his expression torn between awe and horror. "Severina, stop." But she couldn't. The fire wasn't just power, it was memory, rage, pain. Every lash, every insult, every betrayal came alive in that inferno. The chains melted before they could bind her, her body trembling as her form blurred between woman and wolf. "Severina," he said again, softer this time. "Please." For a heartbeat, she met his gaze. Beneath the fear and guilt, she saw what she'd always known: he cared. But caring didn't undo what he'd chosen. "I trusted you," she said. He reached for her, but she stepped back, her flames brightening. "And you gave me to the fire." The ceiling cracked under the force of her power. The ancient banners caught flame, and the chamber filled with light so bright it silenced every sound. When it dimmed, she was gone. Outside, the night waited, cold and endless. She fled into it, the silver flame still clinging to her skin, lighting the path through the ruins of the city. Her breath came in ragged bursts. The sky above was a storm of clouds, the moon veiled but watching. Behind her, the palace burned. She didn't stop running until the forest swallowed her, branches clawing at her as she stumbled through the dark. Her legs gave out near the river, her body collapsing into the mud. She pressed her palms into the earth, shaking, crying without sound. The flames that had once roared through her now faded to faint embers. The scent of smoke lingered on her skin, the last trace of what she'd unleashed. In the distance, the city bells tolled, warning, mourning, accusing. Her howl rose then, breaking the night wide open. It was not the cry of a victim. It was grief and fury, love and loss, freedom and curse, all tangled into one sound that carried across the empire like a storm reborn. Somewhere far behind her, the king stood among the ashes, his crown scorched, his heart hollow. The echo of her howl reached him, and for the first time in his reign, he dropped to his knees. The Luna turned away, her face unreadable, but the faintest flicker of unease crossed her features. The prophecy had spoken. The servant would destroy her savior. But neither understood yet that the destruction had only just begun. The empire was burning. Not just the walls or the marble towers, but the air, the soil, the soul of every wolf that had once called it home. The fire was not Severina's doing anymore. It was what remained after betrayal had eaten through every promise, after silence had turned into screams. Smoke rolled over the horizon, painting the sky in bleeding shades of gold and ash. The moon hung heavy, its light fractured, swallowed by storm clouds that refused to move. Across the scorched fields, the Luna's armies gathered like shadows, hundreds of wolves, their eyes glinting with the same cold obedience she ruled them with. At the center of it all stood the king, unarmored, unguarded, and utterly hollow. His crown was gone, his voice reduced to nothing but whispers of regret. The council had scattered, the throne abandoned. Only the Luna remained steadfast in her vengeance, her beauty now twisted into something vicious and desperate. "She will come for you," the Luna told him. "And when she does, I will burn her myself." Her tone was honeyed venom. The kind that dripped slow and deadly. The king did not answer. He looked beyond her, toward the horizon where the forest ended and the sky began to pulse with an otherworldly light. It started as a shimmer, faint, like heat rising from stone. Then the wind shifted. The wolves grew restless, their instincts betraying the illusion of loyalty. The scent that filled the air was ancient, clean, electric, like the first breath before a storm. The Luna felt it too. Her grip on her blade tightened. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." Then the night tore open. A blinding streak of silver fire split the clouds, roaring downward like a comet sent from the gods. The ground shook. Wolves dropped to their knees, howls torn from their throats by something deeper than fear, reverence. The blaze struck the heart of the field, scattering the army with its shockwave. When the smoke cleared, a single figure stood in its center. Severina. No longer the wounded girl who'd been chained. No longer the servant who'd begged for mercy. Her hair, once dark, flowed in streams of white light, each strand alive with shifting flame. Her eyes glowed molten silver, their reflection swallowing everything they looked upon. The symbol of the silver flame, the mark that had damned her, now blazed proudly across her collarbone, burning with the pulse of her power. The wolves bowed without command. Instinct. Recognition. Her presence wasn't mortal, it was primal divinity. The Luna hissed, her voice breaking through the awe. "You dare return?" Severina lifted her gaze. Her expression was calm, almost sorrowful. "You thought fire would end me." Her voice rippled through the air, steady, resonant, filled with something that made even the wind pause. "You forget. Fire is what I am." The Luna lunged forward, her blade catching the light. Shadows gathered behind her, wolves loyal to her crown charging as one. But the moment they crossed the silver glow that surrounded Severina, their momentum faltered. Her aura met them like a storm meets a flame, it didn't consume, it reshaped. The fire that spilled from her palms didn't scorch flesh, it burned away corruption, cleansing everything it touched. The Luna screamed as her blade met that light. Sparks scattered, steel melted. Her power faltered against the force that was both fury and mercy bound together. "You will destroy everything," the Luna spat, retreating. "Just as your bloodline did." Severina stepped forward, her bare feet sinking into the cracked earth, her aura growing brighter with every breath. "No," she said softly. "My bloodline tried to save it. You turned their warning into prophecy." The king moved before he realized he had. His body placed itself between them, instinct ruling where logic had failed him. His chest bared, his expression stripped of command, he looked at Severina, not as a ruler, not as a penitent man seeking forgiveness, but as someone who finally saw the truth in its purest form. "She's right," he said, his voice breaking. "I was blind. I was weak. I thought I could balance both, love and loyalty, but I failed them all." His breath hitched. "I failed you." For a moment, Severina's fire dimmed. The storm around her paused. "You stood by while they chained me," she said, her voice trembling with controlled rage. "You watched while they carved my mark into sin." He flinched but didn't move. "And I will bear that weight until my last breath." The Luna snarled. "You kneel before a curse." But the king's knees were already sinking into the ash, his head bowed. "No," he whispered. "Before grace." The word lingered. Soft but absolute. Something shifted in the air. Severina's gaze flicked to the Luna. She saw not a rival now, but a reflection of what hatred becomes when it feeds too long. The Luna's eyes, once bright, were ringed with exhaustion. Her power was failing, held together by sheer bitterness. "You built your throne on fear," Severina said, her voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "You taught them to kneel before cruelty. But power born from fear only lasts until someone remembers how to stand." The Luna screamed, her own aura exploding in black flame. The ground split beneath her feet, the sky darkened again, and the wind howled through the broken field. She struck, again and again, blades of shadow slicing through air, each fueled by desperation. Severina didn't flinch. She caught the Luna's wrist mid-strike, the impact ringing like metal against mountain stone. Her silver eyes met the Luna's, and in that gaze, all pretense died. "You wanted a sacrifice," Severina said quietly. "But I am not yours." She lifted her hand, pressing her palm over the Luna's heart. Light burst outward, not violent, not consuming, but absolute. The black fire that coiled around the Luna turned to white, her mark, the mark of the throne, burning away into nothing. The shadows dissolved from her veins, leaving only a woman, trembling and small, where a queen had stood. The battlefield stilled. The wolves lowered their heads, their howls replaced by silence so deep it seemed sacred. The king lifted his gaze, tears streaming freely now. "Severina," his voice cracked on her name. "Forgive me." She turned to him, her light softening, the fury fading into something that carried ache and peace all at once. She stepped closer, until the heat of her aura brushed his skin. He didn't dare reach for her, not again. "I already have," she said. The words landed gently, but they carried weight enough to reshape the night. The flames around them flickered, then bowed, as if the very fire recognized its master. The king closed his eyes, a shuddering breath escaping him. When he opened them, he found her wolf form reflected in his pupils, massive, luminous, divine. She moved not as beast nor goddess, but as both. Her fur shimmered white and silver, each motion bending the air. When she held, it was not grief this time, it was rebirth. The sound rolled through the empire, through the forests, through the ruins of the capital, reaching every corner where wolves had once hidden. The fires across the kingdom dimmed, their crimson replaced by silver glow. The war halted, not by decree, but by awe. The Luna, kneeling in the dirt, stared at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. The black stains of power were gone. Only pale skin remained. Her lips trembled. "What have you done?" Severina looked at her. "Set you free." For a moment, neither moved. The wind carried ashen silence between them. Then Severina turned away, the firelight folding back into her skin until only faint silver patterns glowed along her arms. She walked past the king, past the ruins of the throne that once defined him. He reached for her, but stopped himself. "Where will you go?" She paused, glancing at the horizon where dawn began to break through smoke. "Where I'm needed," she said softly. "The fire must guide, not rule." He bowed his head again, his voice raw. "If I ever see you again—" "You will," she interrupted. "But next time, it won't be as your servant." Her gaze lingered on him for a heartbeat longer, one that carried everything they'd been and everything they could no longer be. Then she walked into the light. The silver blaze followed her steps, each one leaving behind green where there had been ash, life where there had been ruin. Flowers bloomed in the wake of her fire, tiny, trembling, defiant. When she reached the edge of the field, she stopped and looked back. The king was still kneeling. The Luna was still weeping. The empire was still burning, but beneath the ruin, it was beginning to breathe again. Her final words were carried by the wind, low and certain. "This fire was never meant to destroy. Only to remind." And then she was gone, into the dawn, into the forest, into legend. But the flames that had once condemned her now crowned her name across the empire. The wolves would remember the night the silver flame rose, not as a curse, not as prophecy fulfilled in ruin, but as redemption written in fire. The servant had become salvation. And the world, for the first time, learned what it meant to bow, not to fear, but to grace. Dawn broke like a slow confession, the kind that couldn't hide what the night had done. The storm was gone, yet the air still trembled with the echo of her fire. The empire that had roared with war only hours before now lay in silence. Not peace, just the hollow, aching quiet that comes after something too vast to understand. Ash drifted through the air like snow, soft and ghostly. It clung to the ruins, the broken columns, the cracked mosaics that once sang of glory. Every step Severina took left faint traces of silver in the dirt, but even that light was fading now. Her wolf, the divine blaze that had turned night into revelation, had quieted. What remained was only her, flesh, breath, and the soft exhaustion that lives in the bones of those who've given too much. She walked alone. The wind whispered her name, carrying it over what was left of the empire, the Alpha's palace reduced to marble ribs, the courtyards littered with fallen standards. Wolves peeked from the shadows, afraid to approach, unsure whether to bow or speak. They had seen gods rise and fall, but never like this. Her silver eyes flickered once, catching the pale light of morning. Beneath their glow, emotion ran deep, a quiet grief, heavy but not bitter. Her power had saved them. Her fire had rewritten the prophecy. But in its ashes, she had lost the one thing that once made her feel human. Belonging. Behind her, the king still knelt amid the wreckage. His armor lay beside him, scorched and broken, his crown a melted ring half buried in soot. He hadn't spoken since she left him standing in the field of ash. He hadn't needed to. Some silences were truer than words. She glanced back once. Only once. The distance between them was more than miles, it was made of all the choices that had brought them here. Love had saved them both, but not in the way stories promised. It had carved them open, demanded everything, and left them standing in the truth of what could never be undone. Her footsteps carried her through what was once the marketplace, the same marble square where chains had first bound her wrists. The torches that once lit the slate blocks were now cold, their iron frames bent and blackened. She stopped there, for a breath. The same rain-slick stones where she had fallen, begging for freedom, now bore her prints in silver ash. Freedom. She had wanted it all her life. And now she had it. But freedom, she realized, was heavier than the chains had ever been. Somewhere beyond the ruins, children's voices broke through the quiet, wolves who had survived, calling to each other, rebuilding in the shadows. Her lips curved faintly, a ghost of a smile. The world hadn't ended. It had only changed. Still, the questions lingered. They always did. From the wind, from the hearts of those who had watched, from the unseen voices that carried her legend, came the whisper, low, uncertain, haunting. Would you have feared her? The tone wasn't accusation. It was wonder, maybe even guilt. Because it's easy to fear what you don't understand. Easier still to worship it once it's gone. Would you have followed her? The voice asked again. The question hung in the air, drifting between the ruins and the light. It wasn't meant for her, it was meant for them. For the ones who would tell this story. For the ones who would decide whether she was salvation or sin. The horizon blushed pink, soft and slow. Her power flickered faintly under her skin, just enough to make the mist around her shimmer. She didn't look back again. She didn't need to. Another whisper rose, faint but piercing. Was she the hero, or just the girl the world broke too many times? Her breath caught, not because the question hurt, but because it was true. She had been both. Maybe every savior was. The mist thickened as she walked toward the forest edge. The first light of dawn met the last ember of her fire, blending gold with silver until it was impossible to tell where heaven ended and earth began. Her figure blurred, still walking, still breathing, still burning faintly against the soft fog that swallowed everything. Then she was gone. Only her trail remained, a shimmer of silver dust that drifted upward, carried by the morning breeze. It danced briefly in the sunlight, then vanished into the sky. But somewhere deep within the stillness, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting, because legends don't end, they rest. And somewhere, someday, the flame would rise again. And then, softly, her voice, almost like memory, almost like prayer, echoed through the quiet. I was never meant to be your weapon. I was meant to be your mirror. The ashes swirled, the light broke, and the empire began to heal. If her strength made your heart burn, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We awaken them. The ruins had finally fallen silent. The smoke had thinned, the air cooled, and the last echo of Severina's presence faded into the wind. The empire she had touched, burned, saved, and rewritten, lay in uneasy stillness. Marble pillars leaned like weary sentinels, their carved wolves cracked and blackened by flame. The ground itself was scorched with the memory of her power, the faint silver shimmer of ash glinting in the light of a dying day. But silence never lasts long in a world that bleeds magic. The ground trembled first. A faint hum, like the heartbeat of something vast beneath the earth. Dust shifted across the ruins. A whisper moved through the air, threading between the broken arches and fallen blades. It carried a tone older than the kingdom itself, a murmur that sounded half like a curse and half like a promise. Then came the growl. Low. Ancient. Hungry. It rolled through the silence like thunder underwater, shaking loose fragments of stone. Birds burst from the blackened towers, scattering into the mist. The soil cracked open just enough to let out a breath of warmth, like the exhale of something waking from centuries of sleep. A shadow stirred among the remnants of the battlefield. Slow at first, deliberate. A man, or what looked like one, moved through the ash. His armor gleamed faintly, silver catching the dying light, but not clean silver. It was scarred, streaked with burn marks and blood. Each step he took left prints that smoked. He stopped at the place where Severina's last ember had died. He went to his knees and touched the scorched ground with one gauntlet hand. The air hissed as his fingers met it. The ash glowed faintly red beneath his touch. He didn't flinch. The wind picked up again, swirling around him in tight spirals, lifting debris, stirring whispers. His head bowed for a long, still moment, as if he were praying, or mourning, or listening. When he finally raised his face, the light caught his eyes. They weren't the blue of the king. They weren't the silver of the blessed. They burned, crimson, deep and searing, as if fire itself lived inside him. From somewhere behind him, the whisper returned. It didn't belong to any living soul. It came from the ruins, from the bones of the earth, from whatever power Severina had awakened and left behind. She is not the only one marked by fire. The words drifted around him, not spoken but breathed into existence. His eyes closed briefly, as though he'd been expecting them. He looked up at the horizon, where the faintest light of dawn began to rise again. The same dawn she had vanished into. The same sky that still held her fading trail of silver dust. For a moment, something almost soft crossed his expression, recognition, maybe, or longing. Then lightning tore across the horizon. It wasn't the clean, white lightning of a summer storm. It was crimson, jagged, rippling like veins of blood across the sky. It split the clouds open, painting the ruins in the color of old wounds. The wind roared, no longer whispering but howling, calling, summoning. The man rose to his feet. He reached behind him and drew his blade from its sheath. The weapon pulsed faintly with the same red glow that lit his eyes. She freed the light, he said, voice rough, carrying through the chaos. But the flame was never meant to burn alone. His words weren't a vow. They were a warning. The ground trembled again, harder this time. Cracks spidered through the marble, tracing ancient runes once buried deep below. The carvings of wolves that circled the forum began to shift, their stone eyes flickering to life with dull red light. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled, a sound both reverent and afraid. A storm gathered fast. Clouds swirled, heavy and unnatural. The air grew thick, charged with magic. It wasn't Severina's silver blaze that answered this time. It was darker, dirtier. Fire laced with smoke and shadow. Power that didn't cleanse, but consumed. He watched it build, head tilted slightly, the corner of his mouth curling, not in cruelty, but in knowing. They thought the prophecy ended with her, he murmured. But fire has two sides. The ruins glowed under the pulsing storm. The red lightning flashed again, reflecting off the armor, igniting every scar etched into the ground. The wind screamed louder, as if the world itself was remembering something it had tried to forget. And in that chaos, the first spark of something new, and terrible, was born. He looked toward the path where Severina had disappeared, his expression unreadable. There was no hatred there, no anger. Just purpose. Cold and relentless. He sheathed his blade and turned away from the ashes. Behind him, the stone wolves began to crumble completely, their carved mouths opening as if to release one final cry. The crimson light deepened until it looked almost black. The earth's tremor quieted, then fell still again, leaving behind only the faint hum of something vast beneath the surface. Waiting. Watching. He whispered once more, the words lost to the wind. She may be their salvation, but I am their consequence. Then he stepped into the shadows, the last trace of his armor fading into the storm's red light. Far above, thunder cracked again. But hidden inside that thunder, if one listened closely enough, was a second voice, distant yet growing clearer with every echo. It spoke not to the man, not to the ruins, but to the listener. To the one who had followed Severina's journey, who had felt her pain and her power. It asked quietly, like a secret meant only for those who could hear what others could not. What happens when fire meets its reflection? The lightning flared one last time. The sky tore open, spilling a crimson glow across the world, and the ruins lit up in patterns, ancient runes burning for a heartbeat before fading again into smoke. Then everything went still. A breathless quiet. A world between endings and beginnings. A promise made without words. Somewhere, in the heart of that silence, a single ember refused to die. It pulsed faintly, silver against red, like the heartbeat of something immortal. And then the darkness swallowed it. The storm rolled on, carrying whispers that sounded almost like prophecy. Almost like fate rewriting itself once again. The last whisper lingered in the air, soft but certain. This isn't over.